Which Mac should you buy in 2024? Well, Apple have just made your decision easier, yet somehow harder because they've added three brand new Macs. The new Mac Mini, the new MacBook Pro, and the new iMac. New for 2024 with the new M4 chip. So what does that mean for you? Is it time to get your first Mac? Is it time to upgrade your Mac? That's what we're going to be talking about in this week's podcast. Hello, my name is Pete Johns. This is Studio Live today, where my goal is to help you create, record, and release your best music. And many of you choose to do that with an Apple Mac. So what we're going to be doing today is exploring the new Macs, the older Macs, which are not that old, and giving you some suggestions and ideas for kitting out a Mac to use for producing music. Of course, many of you also use the iPad, and I have covered the iPad in detail in other videos, so you can check those out over on the channel as well. Don't forget, you can also check out my gear guide. So I've got every piece of gear that I use in the home studio, including my iPads, including my Macs, and you can check all that out at studiolivetoday.com/gear. So let's cover the basics, shall we? We've got three new Macs. They went in this order. The new iMac, that was announced on Monday of this week. And it has the M4 chip. It has a few additional updates, but it's pretty much the same. Same screen, same configuration, really. The main changes are you now get a base memory of 16 gigabytes, and just take note of that because that's going to be pretty consistent and a pretty common theme across what we talk about here. It still starts at just $12.99, and they have improved the camera. They used to have a potato in this thing, which is just a nice way of saying the camera was absolute rubbish, but now they have actually updated that to a 12 megapixel camera, and you got new colors. Yeah, it comes in blues and greens and tangerines and all the rest of it. So if you are an all-in-one kind of computer kind of person, yeah, you've now got the powerhouse that is the new M4 Silicon on there with at least 16 gigabytes of memory, yeah, it's a good unit. But many of you may be looking for something more flexible, and that's where Apple got you covered. If you don't want to spend the extra and you got your own screen, or you want a BYO screen, the Mac Mini has also been updated. Now, if all the numbers and things I'm telling you don't make any sense here, don't stress. We're going to go into it in detail. I'm going to give you my recommendations for a basic entry-level system, something a bit middle of the road, and then something beefy for those of you that want to do a lot more, maybe using Logic Pro or Final Cut Pro. But the Mac Mini has been supercharged with the new M4 chip, and it still starts at just $599, $499 if you're a student. Don't forget, student discounts. If you've got a valid student ID, you can actually get cheaper Apple gear. Yeah, there's a tip for you. You may not have realized. So the Mac Mini is a great little unit, and this has changed a big time. They have shrunk it down. It used to be 8 by 8, basically. Now it's 5 by 5 inches. It's a little taller. It sits up a little more. A weird decision is that they put the power button on the bottom. Because why not? Hey, we've had it with the Mac mouse for the longest time. It has its charger on the bottom. So why not put the power button on the bottom? But it is much smaller. It is compact. It's got a new airflow design. You can see there at the bottom. And it's actually got three Thunderbolt ports on the back and two USB-C ports on the front. So it's more like the configuration of a Mac Studio, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But you will need to hook up your own mouse, your own keyboard, your own monitor. But again, for $599, it's kind of ridiculously good for you. And if you're using GarageBand in particular, but even Logic Pro, there's a Mac Mini that you're going to be able to spec out for yourself. Last but not least of the new Macs is the MacBook Pro. Yes, this one was announced just today when I'm recording this, yesterday when you're watching this, and yeah, it's available to pre-order. All of these are available to pre-order right now, and they're all going to be released on the 8th of November. I feel for the couriers, your FedEx drivers and your couriers on the 8th of November. There's going to be a lot of Apple products shipping their way around all of the world and all the countries. So the highlights of the MacBook Pros. Yeah, we haven't seen a massive change here. They have updated the camera. Again, that 12 megapixel center stage camera. But the big changes is, again, the base RAM. The memory is at least 16 gigabytes now. I mean, very few people are buying a MacBook Pro with only 8 gigabytes of RAM, but now you can't. And the main reason for that is Apple have been really pushing, throughout all these announcements, they're really heavily pushing AI, which is, as we know, Apple Intelligence. No, I know, you thought it was artificial intelligence. No, Apple have rebranded and renamed it. It's Apple Intelligence. So it comes in silver and black. There's 14-inch and 16-inch versions that you can check out. And it does have an extra port. So the good news here for those of you that like to hook stuff up to your things, you've now got 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, or on the Pro models, and the same with the Mini, the Pro and the Max have Thunderbolt 5, which is an even faster Thunderbolt port. All of those are USB Type-C ports. The only difference is they can support Thunderbolt speeds, and the black there looks nice, but it kind of fades away into the background of the website, doesn't it? So yeah, these are all iterative changes. And here's the thing, you're probably seeing videos already popping into your feeds if you're into this sort of stuff, watching videos from people saying, "Meh, Apple have not changed much at all. It's an iterative change," and it's not. It is definitely not a revolution, or it's an evolution. And I've been saying this for a while. We're at the point now. M1 was a revolution. Going from Intel to Apple's own silicon on a chip, that was revolutionary. That was where you had your quadrupling and quintupling the speed and the power and the performance and the efficiency. From then, M1, M2, M3, M4 have been little steps up. And this is sort of the first tip and the first thing I'll say to you if you are choosing to buy yourself a Mac or upgrading your Mac. If you're on an M1, you probably don't need to update, not at least not immediately. Like for those that have used, remember when the M1 first came out, many of you would have seen these videos that people like me were doing, where people were just firing up Logic Pro and firing up GarageBand and just throwing hundreds of plugins on there and hundreds of tracks. And even the base model Mac Mini M1 with 8 gigabytes of RAM were absolutely doing fine. So you don't need to rush in and upgrade. I know Apple would love me to tell you, yes, you need this for Apple Intelligence. We don't know exactly what Apple Intelligence is going to do, how useful it will be, and how much you're going to care about how well your laptop or your desktop runs Apple Intelligence. So until we see that, yeah, it may be worth just holding off. That being said, if you're having problems, if you're having that not enough memory, not enough space, if like me, you get frustrated because you had 256 gig of storage on your Mac M1, and I updated to an M2 Max Studio with 2 terabytes of space, just because I wanted that extra space and the extra memory as well. So the other Macs that are still around are your MacBook Air. So the MacBook Pro is great, but it's a little pricier. From $999, you can pick up the MacBook Air. And again, the good news here is that even though it's only got the M2 for $999 or the M3 for $1099, as far as the chip goes, you now get 16 gigabytes of memory. And once again, that is so that all of your Macs can actually run Apple Intelligence well. And that's probably the only thing I'd say, that if you're looking to upgrade, yeah, you may want to do it for the memory, because if, like me, your original Mac M1 had only 8 gigabytes of memory, yeah, when it starts doing a whole lot of on-chip AI stuff, it is going to struggle a little bit. You will start getting bottlenecked by the amount of memory, not so much the processor, but the amount of memory. So once again, the MacBook Air, as opposed to 14 and 16-inch, comes in 13 and 15-inch displays, and does a lot of the same things that your MacBook Pro does. Less ports, so if you want to plug in more stuff, MacBook Pro is for you. Less power because it doesn't have the M4 chip or any of the Pro chips. So if you're looking for something that's got a bit more bang, then you will be looking for the MacBook Pro. But the MacBook Air, especially if you're a GarageBand user, and I know many of you are, many GarageBand users use a MacBook Air and it crushes. It does really, really well. You just want to keep in mind memory and especially storage. Because if you're a musician, if you're creating music, or especially if you're doing any video stuff, you will be surprised how quickly you fill up storage. Even 512 or 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes can fill up pretty fast. Now, there are 2 Macs that did not get an update with these new 2024 updates, and they were the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say we are not going to see a new Mac Studio or a new Mac Pro this year in 2024. The rumors are, and based on the fact that Apple said this is the 3rd and final Mac announcement, and we're at the end of October, start of November, I think it's pretty safe to say that the Mac Studio and the Mac Pro will not be updated. So does that mean you shouldn't buy a Mac Studio? Well, not really. I bought a Mac Studio 6 months ago, and I knew at the time that the Mac Studio with M4 would come out sometime. But here's the thing. You can't just keep waiting. You can't wait forever just hoping for the next thing, because guess what? As soon as you buy it, the next thing's already underway. Apple are probably working on M6 right now as they release M4. So you can't live the FOMO life. Well, you can, but it's not going to be super productive for you. You probably just want to move on and get what's going to work for you. And the reason that I chose this beast was all of that business there. Excuse me, was the fact that I wanted all this connectivity. So the Mac Studio, the difference between this and a Mac Mini is that you get 4 Thunderbolt ports on the back. You get 2 USB-A ports, you get HDMI, you get headphone, you get network, you get power, and your button is not on the bottom, which we didn't know that would be the case in the Mini at the time. But I got this one with the M2 Max, which is still a 12-core CPU. I got mine with 64 gigabytes of memory, so I upgraded the memory because I just wanted a machine I knew would last me for years. And here's the good news for me. When the new M4 comes out with M4 Max and M4 Ultra, yeah, it's going to be better, but it's not going to be hugely better. The M2 is still amazing. The M2 Max chip is really, really good. And you'll notice that when Apple release new Macs, they're quite often going to compare them to a Mac that was a couple of generations. So with these new M4s, they've been comparing them to the M1 Mac and quite often to Intel, but when they want to really show off, they compare them to Intel-based Macs. So yeah, the M2 Ultra and the M2 Max are still amazing chips. So if you want more connectivity and if you want more power, you can still look to the Mac Studio because it definitely still has some advantages over the Mac Mini, mainly around that connectivity. I love the fact, I know the Mac Mini is better now because it has 5 ports, but it's only got 3 on the back. And for me, I've got all 4 Thunderbolt ports and both USB-A ports with Gear. Why? Because I run multiple audio interfaces, I run a mixer, I run a camera, I run an HDMI to USB converter so that I can show my iPad screen. I'm a bit unusual, so the Mac Studio is for me because guess what? It's called Studio for a reason. I run a studio. I'm sitting here in my studio right now running my Mac Studio, so it makes sense for me. So that is where we're going to sort of start because you might be thinking, is he going to talk about the Mac Pro? No. Why am I not going to talk about the Mac Pro, the old cheese grater? Well, the reason is that if you need a Mac Pro, you know you need a Mac Pro. You are not watching this video right now if you know that you need a Mac Pro because it starts at $6,999. So very few consumers are going to race out and get the Mac Pro with the M2 Ultra right now, or be waiting and thinking, oh no, when is the new M4 Ultra Mac Pro going to come out? I've got 10 grand burning a hole in my pocket. I would like to buy it immediately. And again, the only real difference between the Mac Pro and the Mac Studio is the fact that you can actually put cards. So if you need to put input and output, additional I/O, so additional cards in there to add, cameras to capture 8K multi-stream video. Again, if you need this, you know who you are. And there's a reason why all these are just numbers and things on here. Yeah, look, maybe if you were doing music production, video transcoding, 3D rendering and animation, you'd want that. But I think even for musicians, unless you are, again, running a full pro $1 million studio, you're probably reaching for a studio, not the Mac Pro. So I'm going to completely ignore this because unless you need PCIe cards and expansion and additional inputs and outputs, you're all but going to ignore the Mac Pro. So we are going to start our Mac comparisons by looking at the Mac Studio and who is it for and who should buy it. Well, I've already given you a little bit of information, but if you are like me and if you're doing video and audio production with your computer, and you've got multiple peripherals, both audio and video, that you need plugged in, you don't want to live the dongle life or the docking station life, and you need the power of an Ultra or a Max chip because you don't want to be running a bunch of plugins or doing video encoding and things churning to a halt, the Mac Studio is for you. For everyone else, it's probably not. So there's probably, if I had to guess, knowing the sort of people that you would be that are watching this sort of video, there might be 15 to 20% of you that are going, yeah, that's me. I do have multiple audio devices. I do have a webcam. I do want to convert my iPad to HDMI to USB. But for most of you, you don't. And that's why you don't need to spend this extra money, because it's going to cost you a lot more, from $19.99. But that's the from price, because if we come in here and we decide to buy one and we spec one out with anything more than the absolute base, yeah, the price rises pretty quickly, because the max one starts at $19.99. The Ultra, so the next level up, starts at $39.99. And yes, you get 32 gig of memory and 512 storage, or 64 and 1 terabyte storage on the Ultra. So you get a lot of bang for your buck, but it's an awful lot of buck, isn't it? You are spending a lot to get that. But here's the things to consider. And you can hit pause on this one if you want to, or of course you can jump over to the Apple page. I'm not going to read each one of these out individually, but they're the sort of things that we're going to talk about. When we get to the end and I give you my final thoughts and let you know the key things you need to consider when you're buying a new Mac, then we'll cover those again then. But that is the Mac Studio, and it's a fabulous machine. But you'll know, again, you'll be sitting there and you'll be going, yep, that's me, Pete, that's me, I'll do that. So hold on to that thought, and then when we get to the end, because the specs that we look at are pretty consistent across all the different models. So we will move on now to the Mac Mini. The Mac Mini, the brand new little guy. Look how small it is. Cute little dude, isn't it? So hello, Apple Intelligence. Yes, we can pre-order it now from $599. Now, we've already sort of talked about it and looked at the highlights. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts here now. So we're going to hit this pre-order button and pretend we're buying one, because look at all these options. Yes, there are 4 different options of the Mac Mini, and the good news here, I guess, is that for the most part, they're pretty consistent across the board. You'd remember there was the old sort of 4-port and 2-port Mac Minis. Now it's kind of been consolidated down. So your base model there, what do you get for your $599? You get 16 gigabytes of memory, 256 gigabytes of storage. You get the 16-core dual eligible. You get those 2 USB-C ports and the headphone jack on the front. You get your 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports and HDMI port on the back, and a gigabit Ethernet port. So you get many more ports than the 2-port, the old 2-port model of Mac Mini, and you actually still get an additional port, even though one of them's at the front, than the 4-port Mac Mini. Because remember, the Mac Minis had nothing on the front. Now they're more like the Mac Studio, that they have those ports on the front. So it does mean that you're going to be able to connect up most of your stuff. And for your average person, you know how I talked about the Studio before? Yeah, most people are not going to have more than 3 USB devices that they need to hook up. For the vast majority of people, it's a mixer and or audio interface. Most people creating will only have one. It's a webcam and maybe some solid state drive. So maybe if you didn't get as much storage, you've gone with an external hard drive. We'll talk more about that a little bit later as well. But you're probably not plugging in more than that. Your front ports, if you're like me, you use that to just plug in to, say, charge things, or just to connect, like plug in a USB drive that you're just using on a temporary basis. So they are USB-C ports on the front, as opposed to the Thunderbolt ports on the back. So your stuff that you want to be as fast as possible, that you want plugged in all the time, of course, you plug into the 3 ports at the back, and then you just plug in anything that you're using occasionally that doesn't need to be super fast. You're charging your mouse, you're charging your keyboard, whatever it happens to be, you can plug those in at the front. Now, keep in mind that, yes, all of these have the gigabit Ethernet port. We'll talk about the iMac, because you have to be careful. One of those doesn't have networking, which is a bit weird. It's Wi-Fi only. So, yeah, we'll cover that when we get to the iMac. But you can then go up from there, and these are all the exact same chip, the M4, but they're just different specs. So you go up to the 16 with 512, and you go up to the 24 gigabytes of memory with 512. I would recommend at least 512 storage, if not 1 terabyte. So I don't know if you, for the vast majority of people, you probably don't need 24 gigabytes of memory, but you definitely need at least 16. So even if you're going with this one, I would hit the select button here, and I would strongly consider upgrading your storage. Now, you might be thinking, as I mentioned before, but I can just add an SSD, a solid state drive, and plug that in, and then I've got additional storage. And yes, that's true. But if you're doing anything with music or video, You want to be able to keep things like your sample libraries, the projects you're currently working on. Sure, you can archive stuff off, but you don't want to be constantly accessing an external drive. It's just going to add a lot of extra sort of pipeline to your work, and it can really slow you down and just adds an extra point of failure. So I would highly recommend that in 2024, 1 terabyte is kind of where you want to be. I used to say 512. Now I think it's more like 1 terabyte. So for less than $1,000 though, $999, you can still get yourself the Mac Mini, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and 1 terabyte of storage. That's actually a pretty good deal. I think that that's pretty good. And yes, you can add the additional software and things. What's in the box? Well, you just get the Mac Mini and a power cord. I was about to say, that guy looks like Harrison Ford. That is Harrison Ford. Because Apple would like to show you their new Apple shows, especially the popular ones. Shrinking is the new Ted Lasso. I think it's their new favorite and their new best. So yeah, you can go ahead and you can organize pickup, or you can get that one delivered. But if I was buying a Mac Mini right now and I was a GarageBand or Logic Pro user, that is what I would do. And the only real difference there is if I was a Logic Pro user, I might consider going for the Pro. So the Mac Mini also comes in M2 Pro flavor. So if we come back in here and we go to pre-order it again, that hidden one, which is a bit weird, the hidden one down the bottom here is the one that's the most powerful. So this time you get the 12-core CPU, the 16-core GPU, 24 gigabytes of memory, but still that 512 gigabytes of storage. So once again, if I was a Logic Pro user, I would select this model. You can consider updating your memory and going with 48 or 64. 24 is enough for the vast majority of users, but if you want to future-proof yourself and you got the budget, you can do that. There's also a slightly improved chip that you can choose to go for there as well. Storage, I would definitely go to 1 terabyte, if not up to 2 terabytes of storage, especially if you're using Logic Pro. Those are big project files, especially if you're going to consider using, say, 96-bit or 192. If you're going above 24 and 16-bit audio, you might want to start thinking about having more storage. You don't need all the storage, but having a bit of additional storage can definitely help you out. So that is the main difference. I think that if you're a GarageBand user, I would go the M2 Mini. And if you're a Logic Pro user or a Final Cut Pro user and you're doing more with a lot more sort of higher end software, with a lot more plugins, a lot more features, and maybe bigger files, then the M2 Pro would be a good option for you if your budget can stretch. If it can't, don't get me wrong, the M4, I keep saying M2, the M4 is amazing. Like the M4 will crush 99% of the tasks that most people need it to do. Unless you are rendering out video or unless you are managing 300 track projects with just layer upon layer of sends and receives and plugins, you're probably fine with just the straight M4. The iMac. I've never used an iMac. I've never been an iMac fan. But I know a lot of people, especially GarageBand users, do use the iMac because it's an all-in-one solution. You can plug everything straight into the monitor. You don't have any additional boxes or anything additional. So if you're just using a mixer or an audio interface, it just bang, it goes straight into the back of your machine and everything's right there for you. So I get that. I think the disadvantage of the iMac is if anything goes wrong with the computer, you're left with just a screen. If anything goes wrong with the screen, you're left with a computer that you technically can still, because you can attach additional displays to an iMac, but how weird would that be to have a broken screen iMac? It would just make you constantly feel bad. You'd just be looking at this iMac with a broken screen and then looking at it on a different screen. So I've never been a fan of putting all your eggs in one basket. That being said, it's pretty compelling. If you just want the easiest way, say that you are moving from PC, and you want the easiest way, you want to start using GarageBand and Logic Pro, and you don't even want to think about it. You just want to do it. Well, yeah, that's where your iMac is a good idea because you get a very nice 24-inch monitor built right in there. You can get it in your funky colors as well, so you can color it up and make it look pretty. And it's got all the same features. I'm not going to go into detail about these because you'll notice some familiarities with the Mac Mini. Yeah, all of these M4 pretty much the same configurations as we saw on the Mac Mini. The only difference is you're paying quite a bit more. So at that base level, the base M4 there, instead of $599, you're paying $1299. And it is a little bit different in terms of the ports. So you do get 2 Thunderbolt and USB 4 ports on the base model. You get 4 on the models up. So I would, and that base model again, that 1299 model, you can see there doesn't have gigabit Ethernet. So the Ethernet is in the power adapter of the higher end iMacs. So there's not many people I would recommend this base level iMac to. If you're spending $12.99, I think you're actually spending $14.99 because this one doesn't have Touch ID. You have 2 less Thunderbolt and USB ports, and you don't have gigabit Ethernet. So you can't plug it into your network. You can only use Wi-Fi. That's not quite right. And you get 2 less cores on your GPU and CPU. So for all of those reasons, I reckon your minimum entry point is this green machine here. It's the $14.99 iMac because you do get that additional stuff. And again, I'd probably at least go up to this with 512 and make that your starting point, and then hit the select button here, and then you can choose to add in some more. So we can customize our pink iMac. You can go up to 24 or 32 gigabytes of memory. Again, as we mentioned before, for most folks, 16 will be fine. If you're doing high-end video stuff or Logic Pro stuff where you know you're going to need more memory, you can go up from there. And I would generally go for 1 terabyte of storage. You can choose between the Magic Mouse or pay extra for the trackpad if you want to. You can get the bigger keyboard with the numpad if you're a weird numpad guy like me and you need a numpad. And you'll end up paying about $1,900 for what I would recommend as the sort of iMac that you should be grabbing. And you can see very quickly there that compared to the $999 Mac Mini that we spec'd out, just for the screen, you're kind of adding about $899. You're almost adding $1,000 to your machine to get that screen. There is also the glass, so you can get the nano textured glass, which is the other option that you have there, which will cost more again. So if you want it simple, if you want to keep it simple, sucker, and you want something that you can just plug in, plug and play, and you're off to the races, go with that. But considering, like, I use an LG ultrafine monitor, 4K monitor, that I paid about $600 Australian for, which you can pick up for like $400 US. I would just pair a Mac Mini with a monitor like that and then either buy yourself a Logitech keyboard bundle or pay the couple $100 more to get your keyboard and mouse. So I guess by the time you factor in the keyboard and the mouse and the screen, yeah, you're getting closer there, but I like the fact that because here's the thing, I was able to have my Mac Mini M1, and then when I bought my Mac Studio M2 Max, I just unplugged it and plugged the new one in. Same screen, same keyboards, same connections, did not have to adjust my world at all, and all I had to replace is that one component. And in a world where these devices are just basically consumer devices, they're not really computers anymore because you can't replace any of the components, you can't fix them, you got to take it back to Apple, they refurbish them. So for those reasons, and look, let me know in the comments, if you're watching this one or if you're listening on the podcast version, let me know, are you a massive iMac fan? Am I missing something with the iMac? I've just never been a real iMac kind of person. Should we talk laptops? I think we should talk laptops here now. So, laptops, it's between the Pro and the Air. And it really almost is as simple as, I think the differentiator is that if you are using your MacBook for surfing the web, for social media, for a little bit of light photo work, for GarageBand where you're just plugging in a 2-channel audio interface and recording your demos, the MacBook Air is awesome. It is rad. It is one of the raddest little notebooks in the world. And 13-inch or 15-inch display, so you can go the smaller one or the bigger one. The biggest drawback, the biggest downside, so yes, super portable, super slim, super awesome, but the biggest downside is connectivity. So you don't get a whole lot in the way of connectivity with your MacBook Air. I think it's 2 ports, is it? I'm trying to think out loud here. But what I'm going to do actually, I'm going to do some comparisons here, because one of the best things that we have here when we go into Mac or iPad or iPhone or anything here is this compare. It's highly underrated. Not a lot of folks use this, but you should. Before you buy anything, you should compare. So here we go. We're going to compare Mac models, and we're going to see. Can we see all models? Oh, that's going to be all of them. That's not what we wanted. I wanted the one where we can compare Shop Mac. Maybe we go the Help Me Choose. No. So I'm used to doing these on iPads where you hit the compare button and it just gives you, see, it's there we go. All right, we'll try that again. Maybe we were just in the wrong spot. So hit the compare button here, and yeah, we just hadn't scrolled down. This is all the help stuff. I've got a bit zoomed in here. So this is what we want. So just go to compare, scroll down, and what we're going to do is we are going to compare the MacBook Air with M3, which is the latest MacBook Air. Now, the M2 and the M3, the only difference is the chip, and it's $100 more for the M3. So you can get the M2 and save yourself $100 if you want to. There's not a heap of difference otherwise. So we're just going to put the M3 in here. We're also going to put a MacBook Pro with the M4, the 14-inch here, and we're going to compare it to the 14-inch Pro or Max. So just remember that the 16-inch or the 15-inch of these, so 15-inch MacBook Air or the 16-inch MacBook Pro, are also an option for you there. So let's come down here and compare these. So we've got the Liquid Retina display on the MacBook Air. You've got the Liquid Retina XDR display on the, which is 14.2 inches compared to 13.6 inches. So you get a better display on the MacBook Pro. You get a better chip. So you've only got that M3, only got M3 in the MacBook Air. You've got the M4 chip or the M4 Pro or Max chip in your MacBook Pro. Yes, they're all going to do well with Apple Intelligence. You got more cores of CPU. You got more cores of GPU. You can add more memory. So the MacBook Air will only go up to 24 gigabytes of memory. You can go up to 32 on the MacBook Pro or 128. And the reason that those are all different is it's based on the chip. So it's based on the Pro or the Max or the Ultra chip. So the reason that you're seeing different memory amounts, but they're consistent across different PCs and different Mac types, is for that reason. Same with your storage. You can only get up to 2 terabytes of storage on your vanilla, on your M4, but as soon as you go to the M4 Pro or Max, you can get up to 8 terabytes of storage. Not cheaply, but you can. You get more battery life with your MacBook Pros because you've got bigger batteries in there. They all have Touch ID. Here's the compute. You can hit pause on that and read through all of those different things there, but basically, it gets better. Not amazingly better, though. This is the thing to consider. The difference between these, for people that don't want to think about it, that don't want to know all the nerdy details, it's just slightly better. If this is fast, this is a bit faster, and this is fastest. But it doesn't mean that this one's not fast. It doesn't mean that this one won't do the job for most people most of the time. It just means that for things like video encoding, for things like high-level audio processing, you are going to do better on the M4 Pro chip, and you're going to do better on the M4 MacBook Pro that has more CPU and GPU cores. There's your memory, and again, you can look at all of the different configurations and things you can do with the memory there, and there's your storage as well. So everything from 256 right up to 8 terabytes. And once again, I really wouldn't recommend going below 512. 1 terabyte is really the lowest. I don't know why you'd ever get a 512 gigabyte SSD on an M4 Pro. Save your money, get the M4 and get a bigger drive. I honestly think that for the vast majority of people, more memory and more storage is so much more important than going to the Pro or the Max level chip. So keep that in mind when you're making your purchasing decision. The display. Now, the Liquid Retina XDR display is higher resolution, it's higher brightness, it's got blacker blacks, it's got brighter brights. It's definitely what you want to go for if that is something important to you. So if you're doing video work, this is why I keep saying, if you're into video stuff, the MacBook Pro. If you're not doing anything video and you're really just staring at a Logic Pro or a GarageBand screen, the MacBook Air is definitely 100% sufficient. Size and weight. So yes, it's smaller, it's lighter. The MacBook Air is called Air for a reason. Your MacBook Pros are going to be heavier. The camera. This is something that you need to consider because guess what? You remember that potato I talked about? Yeah, that potato is still in the MacBook Air. It doesn't have the updated 12 megapixel center stage camera, so it can't do center stage. The new MacBook Pros can. So keep that in mind. If you're going to go down the Air route, then yeah, you don't want to be using that front-facing camera for anything important because it really doesn't look good. The audio, look, they talk about their audio being studio quality speakers and studio quality mics. I don't think anyone I'm talking to right now is really that concerned by the quality of the audio. I guess the only thing is if you're doing like Zoom calls, you just don't want to bother plugging anything in, the MacBook Pro is going to be better for that than the MacBook Air. Keyboard and trackpad, Nothing much to see there. They've all got Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3, but here it is. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. The MacBook Air only has 2 Thunderbolt/USB 4 ports, whereas the MacBook Pro has 3. That doesn't seem like it's a big deal until it is, because as I was mentioning before, the vast majority of people can get away with 3 or 4 ports, but most of us you'll feel the need to have a 3rd or 4th port. When you've only got 2 ports, just imagine you've got your audio interface plugged in, you've got a webcam plugged in because your MacBook Air has a potato for its camera, and then you want to plug in an SSD and you want to like offload some projects or back up some files or copy some things. Or you need to charge your mouse that you're using externally. Or you want to plug in an external display. Having just those 2 ports, especially since it has no HDMI port, I think is a big limitation. And that's why I don't recommend the Air for a lot of people unless you know that you're really going to just have it as a basic setup. You're going to plug in, you're going to put maybe one Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 in there, plug in your guitar and your mic and play. You just want the simplest, easiest, cheapest way to do that. So that is what I wanted to cover in detail here between the Air and the Pro. There's other differences there that you can look through there. So the answer is what laptop would I buy? Well, I'm going to tell you that at the end. I'm going to tell you the optimal specs for most people of a MacBook to buy. Let's talk about desktops. Yeah, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to compare, but this time we're going to compare desktops. So we're going to come in here. We're going to look at the Mac Mini, and we're going to compare it to the Mac Studio. We'll throw the iMac in here just for good measure, and we'll do the 4-port model for the reasons I talked about before. So there's your differences: $599, $1999, $1499. So I probably should have put this one in the middle. In fact, let's do that. Let's just make it go from small to large. So put the iMac there, and it's shifted the Mac Studio right to there. Why can't it give us better colors? We only get silver. That's the one thing I am jealous about the iMac is the fact that you can get it in nice bright pastel colors. So let's have a quick look. Display, well, obviously you have a display on the iMac. You don't have any displays on your others. They all come with the M4 or M4 Pro or M4 Max. Let's start that again. They don't all come with. So your Mac Studio comes with the M2 Max and M2 Ultra. Your iMac comes with the M4, and your Mac Mini can come with the M4 or the M4 Pro chip. There's all the details about your cores. So once again, yeah, this is why people get very confused. They're like, well, I'm going to get the new Mac Mini with M4 because M4 is twice as good as 2, right? Well, no, because M2 Max and M2 Ultra will still outperform M4. It's confusing, I know. If they're both pros, if you're comparing apples with apples or pros with pros, then yeah, they are going to be comparable. But remember that the M4, the Pro, the Max, the Ultra, the Max and the Ultra are basically like doubles and quadruples of the original. So they're still going to outperform. And this is why I say don't discount the Studio, especially if you need that extra connectivity, because as you can see there, you get a lot more processing power, and you can go up to 192 gigabytes of memory and 8 terabytes of storage. So there you go. There's all the different chips. We've talked about those enough, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. Yes, they can all run Apple Intelligence. There's your memory, so you can go anything from 16 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes on the Studio. I would go the happy medium is usually around that 24 or 32 for most folks. Storage, 256 up to 2 terabytes for your iMac, up to 8 terabytes for your Pro, Max, and Ultra chips as well. We won't talk about displays except for the fact that you support up to 3 displays on the Mac Mini. You can support up to 8 displays with your Mac Studio. And you get your display built in. You can actually add additional displays to your iMac as well if you want to. Size and weight's there. The camera, which is not super relevant for any but the iMac. And really, the only other important part is the ports. Yeah, so this is where we talked about before that your Mac Studio has those 4 Thunderbolt 4 or 6 on the Ultra. Yeah. So you know how I talked about before that I got the Max because it had 4 ports? yeah, if I was next level, if I was running a full-on pro studio and I had multiple sort of mixers and audio interfaces and keyboards and things, yeah, I might want to go with the 6 ports. And you also get 2 USB-A ports. So that's the only, you might have noticed that we don't have USB-A anymore. None of the current Macs have USB-A. Everything now is USB Type-C. You also get 10 gigabit Ethernet HDMI port, etc. And yeah, you've got the options there. So the iMac doesn't have HDMI, obviously, because it has its own monitor built in, but it's just got those 4 Thunderbolt ports. Or you can get the 2-port model, but as we discussed, don't get the 2-port model. The rest of it's all pretty consistent and not a whole lot of difference between. So that is the differences. And I hope that I've been able to kind of simplify things for you to let you know that the current lineup of Macs is pretty simple to understand, but there just happen to be a lot of them. So it kind of goes in the order that you got your Mac Mini and your iMac at the lower end. You got your Mac Mini with Pro in the middle, and then you got your Mac Studio and your Mac Pro at the top end. In your laptops, you got your MacBook Air, which is your low-end MacBooks, and you got your MacBook Pro, which is your high-end MacBook. As confusing as all that sounds, it is so much better than it used to be. We used to have a MacBook in between that was just a different one again. We used to have the MacBook Pro 13-inch, which wasn't really a Pro, but was called a Pro, which made no sense at all. And we used to have like multiple sizes of iMacs. Now we've only got one iMac, it's 24-inch. We've only got one MacBook Pro, and we don't have the regular MacBook. So it's getting there. It's getting easier. So, conclusion time. What am I buying? What am I recommending to you? If I was you and you were speccing yourself out. So what I'm going to assume is that you are a GarageBand and a Logic Pro user. You don't do heavy video stuff, so we're not talking multiple streams of 4K and 8K video, but you dabble in a bit of, maybe you make a lyric video for your music, or you do some behind the scenes clips from your band and you want to be able to use Final Cut or even just iMovie or LumaFusion or something like that. What would I go for? Well, I think the Mac Mini is currently the best buy because it's kind of the best of all worlds. So now that it's got the additional ports, now that it's got the 2 ports there at the front, as well as the ports on the back, they're all Thunderbolt. And by the way, Thunderbolt or USB Type-C ports, you can convert any of your stuff. So if you've got anything that's using the old USB-A, USB-A is 100%, USB-C is 100% backwards compatible with any USB-A. So if you need to plug in something like an old mouse dongle or something, you can just get a little adapter that goes from USB-C to USB-A type. Because when we talk Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt is just the speed. So think about that in terms of the speed. Thunderbolt 4 or Thunderbolt 5, USB-C is the type of connector, like USB-A. And USB-A can be USB 1, 2, 3. It gets confusing. But trust me that this will have enough connectivity for you. Now, I'm recommending this never having used it, but I have used the Mac Mini M1 and did use it as my daily driver for several years. So I'm pretty confident that this, with the performance of M4, will actually be the best value for folks. Which configuration would I get? Well, you probably already know because we kind of went through it before. I would recommend future-proofing yourself and going with this one, the third one here, starting at $999. So we're going to select that because this one has the additional memory with 224 gigabytes of memory, and I would update the storage to 1 terabyte. So for your average Joe out there that's pretty creative, using Logic Pro, using GarageBand, maybe using a bit of Final Cut or video editing, I would buy this for $11.99. With all of the with a terabyte of storage, 24 gigabytes of memory. I think you're going to future-proof yourself. You've got 5 ports for plugging stuff in, 3 at the back for all your important stuff, and then 2 at the front there for your charging and for your drives and for whatever else you need. I just think this is your best bang for buck. If money is no object, then you've got a choice to make, because the Mac Studio, the M2 Max and the M2 Ultra are still great, but they're very pricey. I actually think unless you need that one additional port, now that you've got the 3 ports on the back and the 2 on the front, I think the Pro, the M2 Pro version of the Mac Mini, is actually a great option. So if we once again select this one, if you just wanted to slightly more future-proof yourself, I'd do exactly the same with this. I'd go to the 1 terabyte of storage. You can consider the 48 gigabytes of RAM if you wanted to, and then you've got a $19.99. And I would go this over that base Studio because you get the more modern chip. Sure, you don't get the power of the Max or the Ultra, but you're going to get yourself an M4 Pro with 48 gigabytes of memory and a terabyte of storage, and you get it for under $2,000, which is still amazing. Like when you think about the quality and the power of these computers compared to what we used to have, the price hasn't gone up. Like I know people think Apple equal expensive, and I'm not going to sit here and say that everyone just has $2,000 burning a hole in their pocket, but it's still a pretty amazing deal considering that $2,000 computer 10 years ago was so much worse. And it's not like these computers are 10 times faster and 10 times more powerful than computers from 10 years ago, but they cost the same, if not less. I think we forget that sometimes. Even with inflation, even with the value, the cost of things going up and the value of the dollar going down, they're still the same dollar price in 2024, which I, again, have to give Apple credit for. I know people love saying the bad things that Apple do. This is a good thing I think that Apple do because their prices don't go up. They kind of can't because of the competition in the market. What about a laptop, Johns? I want to take my recording and my computer use on the road. What about a MacBook? Well, it's the Pro. For all the reasons I said before, I cannot recommend the Air. Not only because you get the potato camera, not only because you only get 2 ports, but the screen's not as good, and it's just all round going to annoy you. You're going to live the dongle life, it's going to annoy you. So I think the sweet spot and what I'm coveting right now is the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, of course, you can go to the 16-inch if you want bigger. I think the 14-inch is pretty good. And for the vast majority of folks, the M4 is going to be just fine. So what would I go? Yeah, we'd go that same spec that we did before. So 24 gig of memory and a terabyte of storage for $19.99. However, the thing is, yeah, unlike the Mini, you're not getting the Pro for that price, but of course you're paying the extra for the screen and the keyboard. So the other option that you have here is to go for the Pro, but you are going to be spending a little more for that. So you're going to go to $23.99. So it does cost you more to get into a MacBook Pro, and they're the options I'd go with, either $19.99 or $23.99. But yeah, if you want the portability, and the thing is, with the additional port, you've now got those 3 ports, remember, 3 USB Type-C ports, one on one side, 2 on the other. You still get a headphone jack. You get your HDMI. I think it's a pretty good way to go. I think so. And if you want those Thunderbolt 5 ports, yeah, you go the Pro. So yeah, anything from $1,000 for that sort of still great, but kind of entry-level Mac Mini, right up to about $2,400 for a MacBook Pro. I think anything more than that, obviously, if you've got the budget for it and you want to spec it out more, you go for it. The more memory you can add in and the more storage you add in, the less hassle it will be and the more you will future-proof yourself. The one final thing I wanted to mention is that you can, of course, buy refurbished Apple gear. And if we come in here and we type refurbished, we can jump in and take a look at refurbished devices. So you can shop refurbished Mac and you can come in here and see what's available for you in your part of the world right now. And the good news is that if you don't need the latest and greatest, you can see here that there's some very cheap M1 and M2 MacBooks, MacBook Airs, Mac Minis that you can choose from. And that's going to increase because guess what? A lot of people now are going to be jumping into these new devices. They want the new hotness. They want the latest and greatest, so they're going to do that. The other thing I'll recommend, as we mentioned at the start, is to go over to my gear guide, studiolivetoday.com/gear. Click on the Macs and the iPads and the gear that I use. It'll take you over to eBay or to Thomann or to Amazon or to a bunch of different places, and then go shopping there, because you'll be amazed at some of the good deals you can get on both refurbished, but there'll also be additional models. So especially on places like Amazon, there'll be models of the old ones that are on their way out, the M2s and the M3s, that'll be a lot cheaper because, again, they need to shift that stock. So keep your eyes peeled for some run-out models of the older ones because, again, I've said it before and I'll continue saying it, but if you use a Mac right now that has an M in front of it, you're pretty much good to go. Anything M1 or better, even if it's only got 8 gigabytes of memory, even if it's only got 256 gig of storage, is still more than enough for the vast majority of people. So yeah, keep that in mind that you don't need to buy the new hotness, the new latest and greatest, although they are pretty good deals, especially that new Mac Mini. It's kind of adorable. I kind of love it. That is going to do it for this week's Studio Live Today podcast. Do we have more Apple announcements coming? Am I going to put all this out there and then suddenly they do announce new things? Well, probably, because that's usually what happens. Remember, I'm the guy who famously said Logic Pro is never coming to iPad. And then literally months after that, we had Logic Pro for iPad. So yeah, you can't believe everything or most things that I say because I don't know. I'm not in the inside loop. I just try to keep up with it and I try to simplify this stuff, remove all the superlatives and just tell you what's the best bang for your buck. Because at the end of the day, we've all got limited resources. You want to make sure that you can keep creating but not spend a fortune along the way. So thank you again for watching or for listening to this one. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it and you're watching the video version. Leave a rating or review if you're listening to the audio version of this. I know a lot of it was showing as well as telling here. I tried to tell as much as I could, but you might want to go and check out the video version. And don't forget to jump over to studiolivetoday.com, especially to studiolivetoday.com/gear to check out all of the gear that I recommend. Those are affiliate links on that page, so they will break off a chunk and send it to me. Thank you, everyone. Please be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other, be kind to your wallet, and I'll see you next time here on the Studio Live Today podcast.